Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Kim Turner Podcast. In episode 5, we're going to talk about something that may or may not be on your radar as a 911 first responder. It's this idea of school violence. I know for a fact you've taken a call from a school, from whether it's a teacher, a CPS or CFS worker, it might be a school resource officer, it might be a student, it might be a school administrator. It's a problem that we know exists, but we often don't receive training or have the discussion. So I'd like to start us off with this newscast that City for City News that's talking about this idea and concept of school violence.
We've seen a number of disturbing incidents at GTA schools recently. Brawls in the hallways, bullying, and even an alleged machete attack. As some teachers warn they too are seeing a rise in violence at their schools.
Things are absolutely getting worse.
A recent OSSTF survey revealed 35% of teachers and 85% of education assistants with the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation reported being the targets of physical aggression in schools.
Would you say the majority of teachers feel safe in schools?
I would say most likely not, and that's a really unfortunate thing to say.
And it isn't just the public high school union. Recently, 20 members of the Durham chapter of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario walked off the job for one day, citing unsafe conditions at an Oshawa school. Durham's public school board says the work refusal was resolved and all concerns were addressed. The union adds that teachers in Durham's elementary schools are reporting violence at a higher rate than in previous school years. Inappropriate behaviors are going unaddressed by administrators and the school board, which further normalizes violence in our schools. OSSTF says there's a chronic lack of support for mental health, social workers, and psychologists in schools.
We're not able to do that early intervention and to address needs. And the results are what we're seeing now in the headlines. And unfortunately, a lot of people are very nervous to go into the school buildings. This is all a result of chronic underfunding of the public education system.
The Ministry of Education says it invested $24 million to enhance school safety this school year and hire 2,000 new staff, adding, quote, "We introduced new mental health modules developed with School Mental Health Ontario, along with the support of Sick Kids, that provides a toolkit of practical knowledge to manage stress and keep kids safe and focused in school and beyond." But OSSTF says the province also removed funding from schools.
Since the Ford government was elected in 2018, there's $1,200 less in per pupil funding.
The province also telling City News the government will be collaborating closely with partners, including law enforcement, to keep schools safe from rising violence.
All right, so that was a news report from our neighbors up north in Canada. What I could tell you is that there are a myriad of similar news stories from here in the U.S. I elected to show Canada because most of us in the U.S. think the last place this issue would exist would be north of the border. I want to tell you it's an international problem, not just a U.S. problem. So it leads to the question, why should 911 first responders know about school violence? Well, let's state the obvious. Maybe you have kids in school. That's the first reason, right? So like personally, having an investment, what's going on in my kid's school, whether it's elementary, middle school, or high school, I think we all have a stake in the game. But I want to kind of talk about some broader concepts, right? As a 911 first responder, rapid response, we all know seconds save lives. We are often the first point of contact. So if you go back and you were to look at incidents of school violence, whether it's a fight, whether it's something involving weapons, whether it's what we consider to be our worst case scenario, which is an active shooter or active assailant situation, we are often the first point of contact. The second reason is having an accurate assessment. What our role is to take pieces of information and make it make sense, whether it warrants a response or field units or not, right? So by recognizing the signs of school violence, understanding its various forms, dispatchers can more accurately assess the risk level and potential for escalation. That's a mouthful, but that's what we do every single day. when someone calls and maybe it doesn't fit in a box of what a call type or type code would be. If we have identified the fact that we actually have something here where I'm going to allocate resources to, making an informed decision, especially something requiring a multi-agency or multi-discipline response. I want us to think outside the box here. That multi-discipline response may go outside of the police, fire, EMS role. What school resources? How many school districts do you have in the jurisdiction that you're responsible for? Maybe you're working a consolidated PSAP. Maybe there are 10, 15, 20 school districts. What are those resources? Do we know? That's a loaded question. And one, if you're a 911 first responder, you may not have considered, but I'd like you to. And to sort of have a conversation about school violence, I want to introduce one of the most senior or second most senior instructor Kim Turner team, Anthony Alvo. Anthony brings a depth of experience, a wealth of knowledge as a police officer, a dispatcher, and as a teacher in a public high school. He is a subject matter expert in the idea of school violence. It's kind of sad, really, that expertise is needed, but it is. So who better to learn from? And what he teaches for 911 first responders. He also develops curriculum specific for school districts. So if you happen to be a teacher who stumbled across this podcast, or you have a teacher in your life and you know that this information will be important and pertinent, have them tune in and have them take a listen, and make sure to reach out so that we can develop training specifically for your jurisdiction. And Anthony, I get that, you were just a cop, a dispatcher, and a school teacher. Really, the question I have for you is, when you think about your experience as a police officer with LAPD, with Chino PD, as a dispatcher in the largest county in the U.S., they couple with your experience, right, in a public high school. When you think about school violence, from all of those perspectives, what's your opinion on what you've experienced, what you've seen, and what are the challenges, do you think?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot to unpack there. With the mind of a police officer and dispatcher, now a criminal justice instructor at a public high school, you think you're prepared, right? Because you have this experience with law enforcement, and you step into a classroom, but you're not prepared. Nothing can truly prepare you for a classroom. We talk about getting your teaching credential and going to school to get your education to qualify. That doesn't prepare you. So as a teacher, I saw just a tremendous amount, I'm going to say, criminal activity. If it's occurring outside of the school, in the local community, it's coming into the school. So wow. From 415 fights to domestic violence, to drug use, possession, alcohol. If you, like I said, if it's happening out in the community, it's being brought in, and it's rather eye-opening, because I had the fortune of going to private schools, so I couldn't say that I knew what a public high school was like. So it was eye-opening. I learned a lot, and I'll tell you, my ability to communicate, because of my experience as a police officer and dispatcher, was a saving grace in the classroom. So
in what way?
I've already been trained on how to de-escalate situations, how to manage unruly students, right? How to talk to parents about their misbehaving children. So yes, I was prepared to be able to manage, but to the fullest extent of experiencing it, I had little practice in terms of inside the classroom.
What was the most eye-opening part of that when you said, "Hey, I really wasn't prepared"? Like, what part of that was it? The shock value of what was actually going on in school?
I'll tell you, kids. Um, I thought kids wouldn't be able to surprise me. What they say, what they do in a classroom. Oh, kids are humans are unpredictable, and children still growing and learning their bodies and their personalities and trying to figure out things. And they've got so much societal influence, whether it's from social media, home, friends, that sort of thing. You would so they use that. Um, I was gonna say that they typically will say and do things you just really can't predict, and so it's shocking that of what you hear in a classroom. I almost wish teachers had body worn cameras.
Oh, wow.
Because I really do. I honestly feel that children, when they're away from their parents, and I know this because I was one, acted or behaved differently, maybe more bold, more stubborn. And so, however, if they know they're being recorded, typically, they're going to behave a certain way. Now, that's not going to be true for all children, but I do believe that cameras in the classroom or on teachers would make a big difference inside that classroom.
So it sounds like I need to reach out to Axon to be a sponsor of this podcast. That's what it sounds like.
I'll tell you, yeah, that would be a huge production.
But you actually mentioned, I mean, like if you stop and think about this for a moment, because you and I both were police officers before body-worn cameras were even conceptualized, let alone part of your standard uniform. Um, and if we think about that transition, I actually think what you're proposing is very viable. Like, I actually think every teachers association in America will be on board with it. Because if you've ever been in the position to try to articulate the behavior of someone else versus let me show you the video of what was going on, right? I think that it would just change the paradigm, not only for the potential positive outcomes of behavior of students, but how many teachers will feel vindicated for, look, this is what I'm dealing with in my classroom. And I kind of, this leads me to another question I have for you though. When you think about like our experience as 911 first responders, what is it about, you're a subject matter expert when it comes to this topic and idea of school violence, training 911 dispatchers. If you think about your time as a, not only as a call taker, a dispatcher, as a CTO, what is it about that particular topic? If you get a call from a school or disturbance from a school, now that you're, really become an expert in this area, would have made a big difference for you taking that initial call?
Well, I'll tell you, dispatchers are trained to manage through a crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
To get the pertinent information as effectively as possible, as efficiently as possible. So they're conditioned to, what's your last name? What's your first name? Confirm your phone number. What's the location? Can you confirm the location?
Mm-hmm.
And then, as they continue, it's just question after question after question. And there's a time and a place for that. Don't get me wrong. When there is an active assailant in a school or anywhere else, we gotta get what we need. Now, I'm good. This is truly a change in perspective, because now what I think has to happen is dispatchers have to put a pause for a moment when they're talking to somebody about a complaint of an individual or a concern about an individual in a school. it's no longer question, 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 question. Now they have to kind of flip a switch, and you have to take it easy, slow it down, and ask open-ended questions. They have to get answers that are somewhat long-winded, because when an RP calls to say something about something they saw, see something, say something,
Mm-hmm.
we have to slow down, take in that information, and not just crime or no crime, crime or no crime. Now we're trying to figure out, is there a threat we have to manage, right? So we have to take that threat assessment perspective, slow things down, and learn about the individual, which is truly vastly different than the day in and day out sort of a 911 call taking. And that's difficult for people to be able to go from close-ended questions to open-ended questions and taking your time.
So what I hear you really articulating is this idea that dispatchers and call takers need to understand pre-assessment threat indicators.
Right. These pre-event warning indicators now might just trickle in. You might see something or hear something from an RP that says, well, kind of made a statement, and it might be vague, like, you better watch your back, right?
Mm.
Are we thinking 422 criminal threats? Well, yeah, it's a California penal code. Are we thinking criminal threat or not, right? And if it's not a criminal threat, we may not field a phone. We may not field a call. So we have to make this determination of whether that threat exists, and if it exists, right? If there's other just one doesn't necessarily mean one prevent warning sign doesn't mean you're going to shoot up everybody, right? It's recognizing what are prevent warning signs, being able to extract these from an RP, a reporting party, and maybe we're starting to see two or three. Maybe we can get some other additional points of contact who might know that individual, who might have more intelligence or information about that subject. So these pre-event warning signs, because there is no criminal profiler of a active assailant for a school or for a student, it's no longer, well, they kind of dress this way, they kind of act this way. That's not the case. It's now, what behaviors are they doing that is causing you to call the police,
Mm.
right? And so we have to document each of those incidences and make sure that I believe that that student, right, is investigated not only by police, but let's copy the call or send the school resource officer that incident number. And what we're starting to do is create
A nexus.
thank you, create a nexus between police and the school. And it's these communicative efforts that I believe are really preventing school violence, because they're like silos, right? Schools will handle school problems and police will handle police problems, and we have no idea if they're connected or not. So
I really
I
love the
think
way. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would say I think it's our responsibility to initiate that connection, that nexus between the schools and law enforcement.
I really love the way you phrase that question too. I'm thinking about, like, under the headset, having an RP on the phone. It's a school. What they've articulated to me is it going to warrant, right? It's not a crime. And it's like I'm trying to figure out what to do with this call. I really love the way you articulate it. What about the student's behavior is really concerning? Because I think that is such a beautiful question. It allows the teacher to then establish the student's baseline, right? And what they're deviating from their baseline, and how we then switch on our professional first responder hat to say, oh, well, this is something that at the very least is going, even if it's an info call, you know, and I know that every jurisdiction in our country may I know every jurisdiction took a look at school resource officers in the last couple of years, right? Many jurisdictions decided we're doubling down. Many decided we're removing a police presence. But regardless of what that administrative decision is, there is a place for us for those info calls at the very least, for those to go, so we can have a follow up for those things. Because I think all of us have a special sensitivity when it comes to schools, when it comes to the idea that we want to prevent violence on our campuses,
Yeah,
whether that's
and
a high school or a college, right?
yeah, and let's call it for what it is. To a certain extent, Kim, it meets various definitions of domestic terrorism. It is it
Mm,
is it is an individual who commits acts of violence or threats of violence against its own citizens, right? That's part of the FBI's
yeah.
definition. The second part of FBI's definition is to perpetuate their ideological values, whether religious, political, or social, um, environmental, right? Now, there are some shooters in the past that have had uh, social goals, right? We've seen in Santa Barbara a person
Ooh,
who was
incel.
right, incel, right, um, who was upset with these young ladies or women in general, right? And so if you are not going to find me attractive or spend time with me, then you know what? I'm going to regulate the situation. And unfortunately, the only way he knew how to was to kill, harm, maim. You know, and so I mean that's not a very far stretch calling it a form of terrorism. And
It's not a far stretch at all. It's fascinating because I never once considered it, but it absolutely meets the definition.
yeah, and here's the thing about schools. You had mentioned that people have a special place in their heart for schools. Why? Because they're children. Children are unprotected, right? Children are young, they're naive, they're innocent, right? Although some might argue maybe not so innocent, right? And so when there's fear in a schooling environment or culture, it harms the ability to teach and it harms the ability to learn. And it really does an injustice to everyone in that schooling environment, especially days after a report of another school shooting.
Mm. I'm just really thinking about this idea that there's so many examples, right? As you were speaking, I was thinking about, yeah, warrants the definition of domestic terrorism. And I don't think the average dispatcher, police officer, school teacher really thinks about it like that. The gravity in which we need to approach these things that are happening in school. So I appreciate you really enlightening me, but also enlightening our audience to this. And one thing I'll ask is and sort of talk about briefly. You teach a school violence course. Like what are your sort of main goals and objectives? Because you're the subject matter expert in this topic. What are your goals and objectives in that course?
Yeah, what I like to do is I start out with this assessment that doesn't look or sound like an assessment. I create a scenario, and in that scenario, there may or may not be pre-event warning indicators. And so my students have to kind of look at that scenario and base on what they read, should I create a call for service or should I not? So a large portion of the class is learning pre-event warning indicators so they can read between the lines, right? So they can figure out what the RP means and not what they're
Mm,
saying. Because, we don't always say what we mean, and a dispatcher's got to be able to listen actively, right? And read between the lines and then confirm, obviously we're not just going to, guess what we think that they mean. another portion of the class is being able to slow down and conduct an investigation. We're going to learn about different things about that child or that student, their behaviors, the drastic changes of perhaps they were social, now they're isolated. Perhaps they were a happy individual and now they're sad and depressed. So we're looking at drastic changes. So we're looking at what to document and how to document it, right? That's incredibly important. Of course, we go through listening through case studies of hearing dispatchers respond to RPs in the one of their biggest moments of crisis, right? And being able to know which questions to ask at a particular time so that we respond well during their time of need and reduce delay. And so those are just a few of the things. And then lastly, I want to share what I think is really important is that connection between law enforcement and schools, right? There are a number of things that we can request from the school district so that we can have at the ready. So when something happens at a particular school, we have a map in a PDF file downloaded onto every terminal, along with other information that the school has at its fingertips and wanting to give to you, right? Because, well, during a time of emergency, they want less delay. So we try and incorporate those things into our course so that our dispatchers and it's an abbreviated 4-hour course, right? So it's not going to wreak havoc necessarily on the schedule for
I
our
know about
dispatch.
the schedules.
Yeah,
I
right.
appreciate that. I really do. And just lastly, Anthony, just really quickly, sort of your background. I know I mentioned that you're a police officer and a dispatcher. Would you mind just sharing, just like briefly, your background, starting with the Corps?
Certainly, I was gonna say, well, I started out with the United States Marine Corps. I did 6 active, 6 reserves, and I did a tour in Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom. And after my
Thank
first
you
four
for your
years,
service.
you're very welcome, ma'am. Uh, After my first 4 years, I got out and started with Los Angeles Police Department. Did a did some time there, a few years, and then moved over to Chino Police Department, where I did 12 years of police work altogether until I became injured on duty, and subsequently became a dispatcher, and left Chino Police Department for San Bernardino County Sheriff's, where I rose to the ranks up to CTO and worked in the training unit. And that is when I decided to go back to school, right? And I got a master's degree in education with a specialization of teaching adults. And then subsequently, after I'd say about 10 years or so as a dispatcher, I moved to a public high school teaching criminal justice courses. And I did that for 6 years. And that's where I gained my boots on the ground experiences with some of those students. Yeah, that's a little bit about my background.
I appreciate that. And just a point of a clarification, you rose to the rank of a trainer, but that's really a dispatcher 3 or a lead. So you minimize that, but that's a big deal. So I just want to kind of point that out because I don't want that to be overlooked. Anthony, I can't thank you enough for your time and really lending your insight to something that's really important, right? Nationally across our society. I actually think it's an international problem, right? But thank you for this and for this conversation today. I look forward to speaking with you again and just, jaw jacking. And I can't wait to see you later on in summer when we partake in an adult beverage. So have a wonderful afternoon and thank you again. I appreciate you.
You're very welcome.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Anthony. He's a phenomenal instructor and just a great human being. And I'm really proud to call him a friend. He's my brother, really. So thank you very much, Anthony. And I'm in that heart space And if you know me, you know that I spent almost 12 years, well, no, just shy of 11 years with San Jose Police Department. And when I think about my career on the line as a call taker dispatcher, as a CTO, as a senior at San Jose PD. And so a shout out to all my Northern California Bay Area 911 first responders. I miss you. You know you're in my heart. And we got a surprise coming for you for Dispatcher Week. So I'm excited for that as well. But I'd like for you to take a moment. If you are in the Bay Area and you're thinking about, I want to start my career, I'm thinking about lateraling, San Jose Police Department is an amazing, amazing place to work. It's truly a family. And I'd love for us to do our second part, which is that recruitment, is providing a space for those to reach out, provide some recruitment opportunities to get the word out for what separates your agency from other agencies. Why is it a great place to work? So I'm doing a call to action for all my 911 PSAPs. If you're looking for a place to do positive recruitment, to come on and talk about your department, make sure you hit me in the link below. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and get the word out. I look forward to hearing from you. And without further ado, here's San Jose Police Department.
San Jose Emergency, what are you reporting?
Yes, we're in the DTA, Guadalupe Yard. We have an active shooter.
Is anyone shot?
Yes, I think 8 people.
8 people are shot?
Yes.
We have medical and officers on their way. So go ahead and speak with the officers, okay?
Okay, alrighty.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, I'd like to introduce the official recruiter for 911 for all civilian jobs, the San Jose Police Department. Welcome, Tanya Riles, to the Kim Turner podcast. I appreciate you being here today and let us know a little bit about San Jose PD and how we can get on board. So I would ask you, like right now, like if I lived in Northern California, how would I even know to apply to San Jose PD? Like, where would I even go for that, Tanya?
Mm-hmm.
No,
So,
I'm asking you, like, where would I even go?
We have an SJPDU website where you can apply for all civilian careers with the department. But we try to get out there, and we're going to colleges, and we had a kiosk in the mall that was fruitful for.
Wait, which mall?
Oak Ridge.
Westfield? Where?
Oak Ridge.
Oak Ridge Mall. Okay.
Yeah, and that's the
where
thing.
Is it? Where is it in the mall?
It's not there anymore because we were in an actual store. But that was fruitful for us because the majority of the people who came there were more interested in dispatch than they were police, officer jobs. So I think the whole thing is just getting us out there. People don't know. They're like, I thought about being a dispatcher, but I never knew where to go, who to contact. So
where would they go? Like if I thought, I may be interested in being a 911 first responder, because I think there's a lot of people who really want to serve their communities, but they have zero interest in being an officer, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that many people understand that 911, you're a civilian, you're not an officer in the field.
Right.
Like, where would I go to learn about that career? And why would I consider San Jose PD?
So we are actually hosting a civilian career fair on April the 6th for that specific reason, to just let people know about dispatch, about our records division, about CSOs, all civilian positions within the police department. And I think that that's the best thing to do. If you're interested, reach out to your local agency and see if you could do a sit-along and what their program is. Some people have dispatch academies. We're looking about start a civilian academy. We're thinking about starting something like that. But and San Jose, honestly, you're gonna get the best training. My father was a sergeant with our department and told me I should have been a dispatcher a long time ago. I'm like, no way. I cry at commercials. I cry at movies. There's no way I could answer the phone and talk to somebody on their worst day. But training really helps you get through it, and it's one of the most rewarding careers. So I think that that's the best way to start.
So what's really funny is you really do cry at commercials and you really
Yes,
do cry at
yes.
movies. So April 6th, what is that? Is that virtual? Is that in person? Where
So
is
it's
it?
in person. And basically, we're going to do kind of rotations. You'll have a session. You'll go to dispatch, you'll go to CSO, you'll go to records, and then you're going to there's a background session just to kind of also
Oh,
know what to expect once you get through the process, the testing process, what to expect after that. And so a backgrounder will come out and discuss, what the process is like. A lot of people say, what would get me disqualified? And honestly, the biggest thing is they tell you, like, just don't lie. You've got to be honest. Things that people think may have got them disqualified probably wouldn't. But if you lie about it, it's a permanent disqualification.
yeah. Where will this be on April 6th?
At our substation, so 6087 Great Oaks Parkway.
Say that again for those who aren't dispatchers. Say slower.
6087 Great Oaks Parkway. And if you check us out SJPDU, there's a link for you to register there.
All right. So what was the link to register?
Our website is sjpdyu.com.
Oh, YO. Okay. So SJPDU, like you,
Yes, we want you.
.com. I like it.
You.
Okay. I like it. I just, one of the things I'm curious, you mentioned your dad, amazing man. And if you were to just have a casual conversation about what you do as a 911 first responder, what would you say? Like, what does a day in the life look like?
Yeah, it varies. And that's the thing that I think is good. It's not the same mundane thing day in and day out. We have
Mm.
call takers because San Jose is so large. We have call takers and radio dispatchers. So as a radio dispatcher, you're expected to do both jobs. And so much has evolved. I mean, we were worried about text to 911. Now we have Flock and, all kind of programs to help assist the officers and the citizens with, what they're calling in for. So we average 1,000 calls a day. A call taker could take 70 to 80 calls in their shift, but it's rewarding.
So with San Jose, you mentioned call taker and you mentioned dispatcher. Because San Jose is the 10th largest city in the country, it's a big department. You start as a call taker where you're handling emergency and non-emergency calls, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a promotion track. So you could promote to a radio dispatcher, but a dispatcher does both radio
Right.
dispatching and call taking, correct?
Yes, yes. So
So,
you could come
so
in and your
there's a,
assignment could be in
go
the
ahead.
morning call taking and afternoon being dispatch.
What was your favorite part, call taking or dispatching?
I think I like a good mixture of both, right? Because sometimes call taking can take a toll on you, right? So then you're radio dispatching, you're kind of got to be in the mode and just go with things and fly by the seat of your pants with whatever's thrown at you. But both, I think, are really rewarding. I think for me, call taking was more valuable, more important, just because I know like I'm affecting somebody's life on a day-to-day basis, right? Just providing them great service on a day that sometimes the worst day of their life.
You kind of mentioned something I want to just key on for just a moment. When I think about, and this is not just, it's just sort of a global perspective of 911. San Jose is a very big department. What do you think makes San Jose different about, like, if I'm considering a career in 911, working at San Jose PD versus working at a small local agency? What do you think the advantages or disadvantages would be working with San Jose versus a smaller department? Because I think that there are differences, right?
There are. And one of the things that I tell people is do your homework. Make sure that you are aware where you're applying for. Everybody looks at the pay, and people will look at, even for us, call taking versus dispatching. Oh, this is a higher pay. Then they get in and realize, like, I'd rather be a call taker. I don't want to dispatch. So that is something that I think is very important, to do your homework and make sure you are aware what you're getting into. I think pay is a big thing. People look at that and then may go to the smaller agencies, but not realize you're the dispatcher and the call taker, and the fire EMS medical response person. So just making sure that you know what you're getting into. And the only way that you're going to do that is by going and visiting the comm centers and doing sit-along.
I think that's really great advice because it's the culture. It's, do I feel comfortable in a very large agency? Do I feel comfortable in a smaller, more close,
Right.
agency? I think that's wonderful advice
Yeah.
because I don't think that there's one size fits all,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And just lastly, I have one last question for you. And I ask everybody this question. So if you were a call type or a type code, what would it be? Don't overthink it.
That's a good one. I have to say 5150. Hot Mess Express.
I love it. Thank you, Tanya. I really appreciate it. And in closing, I know, tell me those links again where people who are interested in learning about this career, maybe coming out on April 6th. If you could tell me those links and we'll make sure we'll drop it in the description as well.
Sure. Again, sjpdyu.com. And Kim, I want to thank you for what you're doing, bringing awareness to our career. Nobody grows up saying they want to be a dispatcher. So this is the only way that we are going to reach out to get the best people in the right seat.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I have a special affinity. San Jose's in my heart and always will be. I love you guys. I can't wait to come up and see you again soon. And thank you. And before I forget, I know Dispatcher Week is coming up, so thank you for all you do. I appreciate you so much. I'll be talking to you soon. I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to episode 5 of the Kim Turner podcast, where we talked about school violence, recruitment for San Jose PD. We're just getting started, folks, so please make sure you subscribe to YouTube so that you get those notifications. We won't bombard you with anything that's not 911 related. And if you're on Instagram, make sure you subscribe as well and download that podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm excited to bring this content. I'm excited to be a part of my 911 community. I look forward to hearing from you. Take care, be well, and be safe.